The first thing I'm going to do is call us to order as I have done, and then we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you so much. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. I'm now going to take roll call. Councilor Waldman.
Here.
Councilor Murray.
Here.
Councilor Burkett.
Here.
Councilor Lucero.
Here.
Councilor Knight. Councilor Parker.
Here, back for some more.
Thank you. I'm pretty sure we're going to probably have Councilor Knight any second, but we'll wait till she appears to put her down as absent or not. All right. I'd like to have a motion to approve the agenda, please.
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Any discussion? All right. Let's everybody signify approval by raising your hand and saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you. The motion has passed. The agenda is approved. The first thing that I want to do before we move on tonight is go ahead and recognize 9/11 National Day of Service and Remembrance. Whereas 20 years ago, on September 11th, 2001, the American people endured the worst attack on U.S. soil in the nation's history with courage and heroism. And whereas in response to this tragedy, Americans across the country came together in a remarkable spirit of patriotism and unity, carrying out countless acts of kindness, generosity, and compassion. And whereas every year since, we come together in solidarity as a nation to remember the first responders and civilians whose lives were cut short by these acts of terror 20 years ago. And whereas we pay tribute to the first responders and citizens who answered the call to save lives with tremendous acts of courage with no hesitation. On the National Day of Service and Remembrance, and each and every day, we must remember to stand united. We do this with understanding, love, and respect for one another. And whereas in 2002, 9/11 Day was created as a way to annually and forever encourage all Americans to remember and pay tribute on the anniversary of the September 11, 2001 attacks through acts of service, including volunteerism, and to keep Americans promise to never forget. And whereas it is fitting to pay tribute to the strength and resilience of the American people who responded in service and compassion, and honor those who continue to serve our country, including active duty and reserve soldiers and their families, veterans and first responders. And whereas on September 11th and the days preceding and following, community members in the village of Corrales have continued to serve the community in a remarkable spirit of unity, honor, and compassion. Now, therefore, I, Joanne D. Roque, Mayor of the village of Corrales, Sandoval County, State of New Mexico, proclaim September 11th, the Day of Service and Remembrance in the village of Corrales, and call upon the people of the village to honor the lives of those lost by participating in community service and remembrance on this day and throughout the year. Thank you. Do I have a motion to pass this resolution?
Mayor, I move that we approve Proclamation 2130.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you so very much. All right, we're now going to move on to Administrator Curry. He's going to give us his report this evening. Ron?
Correct, Mayor. So the first,
Uh-oh, audio problems, my friend. Can we,
I can hear
Ron?
you, Mayor. The first,
go ahead, Ron. There's some audio problems on your end.
okay, can you hear me now?
Yes,
I'd just like to ask Tanya to start off by giving an update on COVID-19.
thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, Administrator Curry, for having me speak today. The big update is I hate to say it, but maybe we're leveling off, and I'm hoping this isn't our standard. Beginning of August, we had a sharp upward curve of cases. August was our 4th highest month ever for COVID cases. We averaged 1.55 per day and ended the month at 48. In comparison, August the year before, we had 3 cases. So far in September, we're at 24 cases for the month of September. So we're averaging 1.71 cases per day. It is behind where we were at in August. In August, at the 14th day, we had 26 cases. But our curve has just leveled off. It seems to be a standard at this point in time. Today, we got 2 new cases in Corrales, 46 in Sandoval County, and the hospitalizations went up by 32 for today over yesterday. They had dropped, but we had 20 deaths yesterday, and 17 of those deaths were hospital deaths. So we are back up to 352 today. We've still been vaccinating. We've been actually vaccinating a lot. Thank you to Chief Martinez and others who've come in on their days off to help with vaccinations. We've increased our vaccinations by 62 since the monthly report was submitted. We have another 100 this week. A lot of that is due to the federal deadline and UNM's deadline to be vaccinated and CNM's deadline to be vaccinated to continue working or going to school comes October or September 31st. So we're September of last year, we had 1 case, so we're definitely going to beat September of last year. Our highest month ever was December of 2020 with 69 cases. We are having a hard time finding test sites. Emergency manager meeting today, we all were complaining about it and are going to ask the state to try to open more testing. People are getting tested 4 and 5 days after being sick. You should test 5 days after exposure, but you want to test early if you're sick, because you may need monoclonal antibody treatment, and it needs to be done within the first 10 days of illness. There is going to be a new test site in Sandoval County. However, it's not an added number of tests. They're just going to take one of the Bernalillo days and move it over to Sandoval County on Fridays. I'll be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions for Commander Ladin?
Mayor?
All right, yes,
Mayor?
Councilor Lucero, sure. Councilor Lucero.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Tanya, for that update. I just have a quick, kind of a curious question regarding the scariest number there, the deaths. Are they calculated in the same time frame as new cases, or are these deaths just they got sick maybe a month ago and just how does that work? How does the calculation?
That's a really good question. No. So they will tell you if it's a previous death, they'll say it's a historical death where someone died and I hadn't been able to autopsy them, and they'll say it's greater than 30 days. The other ones are, I get a daily report. I can see what's in the hospital. I can see how many people are vented. I can see how many are in ICU. I can see how many children are in there. Today, I believe it's 8 with 2 we're waiting on confirmation. We've been running around 8 to 12 peds in the hospitals in the state. And then I see how many die. So when they die in the hospital, they still will get a death certificate, but they do some other testing. So the deaths, the way it looks to me is they lag about 1 to 2 days from when they actually die. Because I'll know of a death and then it won't pop up in the system till a day or 2, but they die, they have to get the death certificate. But if they're older, they will say historical death.
Thank you, Tanya. That answered my question. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have questions for Commander Ladin?
I do.
Yes,
How
who's
many-
this?
This is Kurt Flora.
I'm sorry, Mr. Flora, this is not a time for comments from the public, just from the counselors. Thank you. Any other questions from the counselors? All right, I would just like to really thank Tanya. She continues to do a remarkable job. And I think we can all say she's kind of tired. So thank you for everything you're doing, Commander.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Curry?
Next person I'd like to call on is Chris, if she's there, to give a update on the bike and pedestrian trail.
Okay, yes, I'm there. Good evening, Mayor Roque and members of the council and Administrator Curry. Hopefully Aaron was able to give you the proposal that the Corrales Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee has submitted. I'm afraid I got it to him late because we were busy doing the Corrales Art Studio tour with my husband. But essentially what the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee would like to do is have an event in April at the Corrales Recreation Center. This would be a multi-department, multi-commission event. We have included there's a list in the proposal, the Bosque Commission, the Parks and Recreation Commission, the Equestrian Commission. We'd like to have village departments like the fire department, the police department, animal control there. The purpose of the event, which we envision to be perhaps a 2 or 3 hour event, would be to present demonstrations, small talks by people, all evolving around safety on Corrales trails. We have seen with the advent of the pandemic, much more traffic on Corrales trails, and there have been user conflicts between bicyclists and equestrians, equestrians and pedestrians, pedestrians and bicyclists. Several incidents have occurred with dog walkers, it's particularly people who are walking dogs either on an extended lead or off a leash completely. And I've experienced a lot of this myself. And so after about the 14th time of somebody saying to me, my dog is friendly, and me responding, my dog is not, I went to the commission, and we had originally decided to have a small trail fair in conjunction with the Makers Market, but we have now expanded it to include not just our commission, but all the relevant commissions and all the relevant departments. So
I think it sounds like a great idea, Chris. I like the fact that all of the committees will be working together with Parks and Rec to inform everybody so that we can have as safe as possible passage on all of our trails. Do I have any questions for Chris? Yes, Councilor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, you foresee this being a recurring event? So maybe April, then maybe one in the fall, or are we looking at just one time?
This is fairly ambitious. So we'll see if we can pull this off. If we can pull this off, and by the way, I'm hoping to make it fun. I would love to have a food truck there. I've already spoken to somebody about providing a little background country Western music. I want it to be fun for people. I want it to draw people in and educate them. So we'll see if we can pull this off and we feel it's successful and we've extended the education, not just to people there, but hopefully they will pass the word along to their friends and family. Then yes, we could have it perhaps every year or every other year.
So would it possibly maybe fold it into Harvest Festival as well? Maybe a small subset of it or something?
Possibly. And I did I toured all of the commissions when we first set this up to invite them to participate. And I believe it was somebody in Parks and Recreation who suggested we do it with Harvest Festival. It was impossible this year. It just was too short a time frame. But you know, April makes sense because that's the beginning of the time for people to get outdoors. But October might also make sense because it's good weather and people love to travel on the trails during that cooler fall weather. So yes, I think it's conceivable that we could do a big one in April and perhaps have a single booth up at Harvest Festival as kind of a remember, you know, have some handouts, that sort of thing.
Councilor Waldman, I think I saw your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick question, Chris. Thank you for doing this. A number of people who use the trails are not Corrales residents. Will this be broadcast throughout the metro area for people who might want to participate?
Yes, that would be our intent, to advertise it in Rio Rancho and Albuquerque if we could. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for bringing that to us tonight. Mr. Curry?
I was going to ask Aaron if he wants to give a short update on the ICIP. We had a little progress in the last 2 days. If you're ready to do that, Aaron.
Yeah, absolutely, Ron. I'm not going to speak about our ICIP resolution too much, but in a good step forward, we are starting to receive the grants from our last year's award of ICIPs. So the first one that came around was the $100,000 for the municipal parking facilities. So expect to see that on an agenda coming up, and hopefully that means we'll start to see all of our grant agreements awards coming up the pipe, and hopefully we can start doing some of these projects before the year end. Thank you.
Okay, I have two last comments to make here. On the 22nd of September, we will be holding a Zoom meeting to discuss Meadowlark Phase 2. And it will be a Zoom meeting commencing at 5 in the afternoon. And we're going to be putting door hangers out on the folks' doors out on along the cul-de-sacs, especially along Meadowlark, to let them know that the meeting's coming up so that we can inform them of everything that's going on. And so they will see those door hangers probably coming along on Friday or Monday of next week, Friday of this week or Monday of next week. And I think the mayor will probably have a little note in her mayor's message about this meeting that will be coming up. Again, it will be a Zoom meeting at 5 o'clock on the 22nd. And so everyone's welcome to join in. I know that we'll have Steve Groman there. We'll have Michael Chavez, and certainly Councilor Parker will be there representing his district. And then the last thing, Mayor, I'd like to say thank you for Todd Haynes and Mike Hammond being here tonight. It's a pleasure to have them here supporting the village and the work that we're trying to do in the Bosque. So I appreciate your attendance here, Mike and Todd. So that's all I have to say, Mayor.
Thank you very much. This, of course, is the meeting where the department reports are also included in your materials. Counselors, do any of you have a question for any of the department heads regarding the materials that are included in the packet? Counselor Knight.
Thank you, Mayor.
Certainly.
I was wondering if Michael Chavez had an update about the bicycle path that's being worked on up on the Sandhills.
Michael, are you with us tonight?
Yes, I'm here. Yes,
Okay.
Councilors, Mayor. That's part of the ICIP funds that we're waiting on. We have to wait for the funds to be obligated before we can start the project. So as soon as these come in, we'll get going. I've got the contractor breathing down my neck right now too, so it's all good.
Well, thank you.
Anybody else have a question regarding any of the department's reports that are included in the materials? All right, I don't see any, so we're going to move on to F, which is the Counselor's Forum. This section is for information purposes only, not for discussion and debate, to inform the governing body of an issue or concern that is not addressed on the agenda during the business session. Do I have any counselors who wish to speak? Yes, Counselor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilors, just got a couple items. As of late, we're picking up nighttime noise at our home here in the south end of the village from the Salt Yard West building that's over on 3700 Ellison Drive Northwest. And it's becoming more of a nuisance than anything because since we're outside the city limits, folks here in Corrales and Skyview Acres and Rio Rancho, complaints are starting to come in that it's just music is lasting and being really loud past 10 p.m. So, Mayor, I don't know if you have any pull with Mayor Keller, but it'd sure be helpful if you'd have a talk with him and maybe he could see what he could do about maybe getting Salt Yard West to comply with their city ordinances. I mean, I'm not opposed to young people having a good time, but this loud music is keeping us up and it's disturbing a lot of folks here in the south end of the village.
Okay.
Also, Mayor, if you would, when we get ready to go back to in-person meetings, I think this hybrid format that we have where we're in person and both all Zoom, I think we ought to push this off if we can to other commissions and meetings, because it really, I think it enhances the transparency of the meetings that go on and so forth. But anyway, especially I think in anything that sets in the kind of a quasi judicial review of anything, but it would be, I think it also helps because if there are limitations to social distancing and we can't put as many people in the chambers as possible, I think it also, the Zoom feature also kind of enhances that transparency. So anyway, I would like to see that happen, and kudos to Aaron for the minutes. I appreciate the time links. I think that's really beneficial. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is that you, Counselor Parker?
Yes.
All right.
Mayor Rowe, councilors, two items. One, a lot of the reaching out that the community has done directly to me has been regarding the flooding after the gully washers come through here. I'm of the mindset that these are just going to become more and more frequent and more violent. And I'm curious if there's something that we could do down the line as more of a preventative measure as opposed to a cleanup measure. It seems there's a way that maybe we could utilize the village resources to go to areas that are undeveloped and thus just shed water without any containment at all, and offer to create some type of containment on those properties to help mitigate the flooding from those into the rest of the neighborhood. So just a thought that I had after a conversation with somebody. And then the second thing is just wanted to recognize our local high school. Recently, both the girls soccer team and girls volleyball team were champions in the metro tournaments that were held in recent days. So kudos to all those young ladies working so hard.
Do we know any of them personally, Counselor Parker?
Yeah, there's one that sleeps down the hall from me. So they did real good. They not to focus on just her, but her team dethroned the 6-time reigning champion of the Metro tournament this year. And 5 of the players on this team are either sophomore or freshmen. So the young kids are doing good. So anyway.
Well, congratulations. That's pretty terrific. I think, Kevin Lucero, did you have something, Counselor Lucero?
Yes, ma'am. Just real quick. Thank you, Mayor. And this is in response to many of the conversations and emails I received prior to last council meeting and since regarding the ordinance that we adopted when it comes to cannabis. Now, one thing I want to just kind of iterate, whether you're in favor of cannabis, whether you're not in favor of cannabis, or you don't care. One thing I want to iterate is that it seems that there's a misconception that this governing body somehow legalized cannabis in the state of New Mexico. We did not legalize cannabis. All we are trying to do as a body and as the governing body of Corrales is trying to kind of preemptive attempt to protect our quality of life, right? Putting in regulations that'll kind of the regulations that we know of at this time, because we didn't get very much direction from the state at how to regulate this. So we did our best to try to protect the quality of life of Corrales. And I want to just make sure, I get that out there, that's all that ordinance is trying to do. And as we learn more and as the regulations come out more, we will address those. And if we can move forward with some of them, we will. But that's kind of what was on my mind, and I kind of wanted to get it out there just because I think we're trying to do good things as far as here in Corrales, trying to protect the quality of life. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Counselor. Anyone else have something? Okay, Counselor Burkett. and then Councilor Waldman.
I appreciate it, Mayor. Two quick points of other positive things that are going on in the village to add on to what Councilor Parker already did. Our local brewery, Ex Novo, got a gold and silver medal at Great American Beer Festival. So congratulations to them. And then the Corrales Studio Tour this past weekend, I'm sure many of you guys went out. It seemed to be a huge success. The artist that I spoke with said that attendance was great. So I'm very happy to see that group had a very successful event.
Thank you very much, Councilor Burkett. Councilor Waldman?
Yes, two quick things. I want to follow up what Councilor Parker mentioned about the flooding. I think it may be time to take a look at our ordinances to see whether or not fines could be increased for those who do not comply with ponding and allowing water to flow off their property into their neighbor's property. It's become a serious problem. The fines are minimal. The enforcement is difficult, and I think it may be time to take a look at that again. And secondly, Main Street, Corrales Main Street is having a visit from the state on the 28th, and I requested from Angela Gutierrez to meet with village councilors prior to that meeting so we can get an update and how we can be helpful to her. And she's going to be contacting council to see when she arranged that, hopefully for next week. And that's about it. Thank you.
That's terrific. You know, I know all of you are aware that Angela Gutierrez is the new director of Main Street, executive director of Main Street. And I know she really wants to be real strong partners with the village. So those of you councilors, if you're not that familiar with Main Street and their programming, or even if you are, I would really urge you to speak to Angela and make sure what we can all do together as we move forward with Main Street, our business development partner. So, all right. I think we've heard from everybody. Thank you, everybody, for all of those good pieces of information. We're going to move on to the Coriolanus Forum. This section is for information purposes only, not for discussion and debate. To inform the governing body of an issue or concern that would not be addressed on the agenda during the business session, there's a 3-minute time limit. Aaron, do we have anyone signed up tonight?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I have 2 folks signed up tonight, and the first on my list is Steve Gutierrez.
Okay.
Steve,
Mr.
if you would unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, let me okay, my name is Steve Gutierrez. I live at 7615 Corrales Road. As some of you may be aware, I was previously heavily involved in the last time the subject of growing cannabis in the village came up. I recently sent the mayor and each council member a copy of a report I produced at that time, providing an overview of the impact of growing this product in New Mexico. I would encourage each of you to review that if you have not done so already. As a result of this and the efforts of many others, a carefully worded Ordinance 18-002 was presented and approved in 2018. With the passage of the Cannabis Regulation Act, I believe a hastily approved amendment was made to this ordinance. I have a close associate who has been closely involved with the Cannabis Regulation Act and had them review our ordinance for compliance. Today, I want to share with you the results of their opinion and the provisions of the Regulation Act that highlighted the old 18-2 ordinance was in fact compliant with the act. The following is their opinion, and I quote, "The Village of Corrales has the authority to prohibit the production of cannabis in certain zones so long as there are other zoning categories in which the production of the cannabis is allowed, which is what the village did when it adopted Ordinance 18-002. Section 12 of the Act states clearly that a local jurisdiction may adopt time, place, and manner rules that do not conflict with the Cannabis Regulation Act or the D. Johnson Clean Indoor Act, including rules that reasonably limit density of licenses, operating time, consistent with the neighborhood uses. The ordinance prevents the production of cannabis and the sale of the cannabis products produced on site in certain areas of the village. However, it expressly states that it does not impose any new regulations or requirements relating to facilities in zones other than A1, A2, and H zones of the village, leaving any regulation related to cannabis and cannabis-derived products in those areas for future consideration. I believe prohibiting the production in certain zoning categories is allowed by the act, so long as there are other zones where production is allowed. The act does state that local jurisdictions cannot completely prohibit the operation of a license, end quote. So as specified in the act, a local jurisdiction has many methods available to them to adopt rules governing the production of cannabis. They can restrict allowable locations, limit the density of licenses, and/or operating times consistent with the neighborhood uses. This gives local authorities a wide range of ways to be compliant with the act. In addition to the above, it is also their opinion that Section 5 of the Ordinance 18002 could be in violation of the act. Once again, I quote, Section 5 of the Ordinance does appear to be a problem that seems to completely prohibit the issuance of any building permit or planning or zoning approvals for marijuana cultivation anywhere in the village until federal law no longer makes that activity a federal crime. Such across-the-board prohibition is a violation of the act. The ordinance does have a severability clause, which is helpful because it states that if any section of the ordinance which is found to be unlawful, and I think Section 5 is a violation of the act, the remaining provisions of the ordinance remain
Mr.
intact.
Gutierrez?
Yes.
Okay, if you could wrap up in the next 30 seconds or so, please. Thank you.
I would request that the mayor and the council approve the action to further amend Ordinance 18002. The most recent modification to the ordinance is generally added the wording conducted in compliance with the Cannabis Regulation Act and other applicable state law. I believe this wording is too open-ended and does not prohibit the village against large-scale operations. A simple modification would protect the village and provide a restrictive condition would be something like, per the Cannabis Regulation Act, the village prohibits this activity within the specified zone.
No. Thank you. Thank you for
Yes.
your input, Mr. Gutierrez. Thank you. Aaron, who else do we have?
Next up on the list is Mr. Kurt Flora.
No, that's good. Yeah, I enjoyed the laugh. Here to expose the corruption in the village like I did last month. I tried to get Jeff Rapper to chime in, and I'm glad KRQE News is here on the corruption that's been going on in the village for the last 3 years with our property, the false documents, the extortion of money. I just now earlier today seen a letter that was written to the mayor stating regarding a building plans that were submitted. The guy states here that Lori just hung up on me and very unprofessional display of anger. Yeah, I can believe this, what he says here, because we got the same thing when I spoke to Lori on 2/9/21. We got it on recording when she told me to go F myself. Now, one of the things here, you know, like I said, I've been trying to get the corruption in the village exposed with the extortion of money and the false document that we received. And today we're going to kind of, you know, we got some due process rights violation for the special meeting that the mayor was in when she refused to let my attorney cross-examine that wasn't even an attorney asking the question, but Miss Stevens Cunningham acting as an attorney. So right here, let's start with this real quick before that. Miss Councilor Wright asked, Madam Chair, can I ask one other question? Is there other access to the particular property, the particular tract? Ms. Stevens states here, from what I can tell, there is no other access to this property. So it goes on to, well, let's ask Mrs. Stout about this. Mrs. Stout, you need to be sworn in. Ms. Stout, could Ms. Cunningham, could you repeat the question? Is there more than one access to this particular piece of property? Mrs. Stout states, no, there is not another access to this property. Well, there is. There is not. There's just the access easement shown on the plat. Ms. Lopez, my attorney, asked, can I cross-examine? And was told, no, she could not cross-examine, violating our due process rights. Okay, not letting our attorney cross-examine. Then we go on. My question is, is there another way to this into this particular subdivision? Asked by Mrs. Wright again. Then Lori states after a couple times, yes, there is. So for our subdivision to be denied because of the 20-foot road easement coming over the ditch, when there is another access to our property, not over the ditch, is a problem. We are being denied subdividing our property, and there's other accesses to our property. That's crazy. Okay.
Mr. Flora, if you could wrap up in the next 30 seconds, please. Thank you.
I'm trying to, okay, then we're going to go into real quick here. Mr. Shawina here, I would be delighted to move. Okay. In this one, this statement right here, Mr. Shawina says, I just want to direct that we are all talking about the same piece of paper. This is for both commission and applicant, that we all agree, all parties are looking at the same plat, lot 1, 2, and 3, drawn up by Community Services, dated October 5th, 2018. Is that the most current? Is that what we are all looking at? In his motion, he states, I would be delighted to move that we approve the preliminary plat submitted to us on dated drawing October 5th, 2018. Is that right? He says that in his motion. Now, on the village website, village meeting minutes, Lori does not put that in the meeting minutes. Okay.
Excuse me. Are we at 3 minutes? Thank you very much for your input, Mr. Haflora. Thank you.
Yes, like I said,
All right.
I'm just trying to expose the village corruption, falsifying documents, extorting money, and lying on meeting minutes. That's a felony.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Do we have any, you're welcome. Do we have any other people who wish to comment on the Coriolanus forum?
Madam Mayor, no one else signed up. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the village council and will be enacted by one motion. There will not be separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. The items on the agenda are approval of minutes for August 17th, 2021 regular council meeting.
Yes.
Number 2 is approval of the transfer of a surplus police vehicle to Hemis Springs PD. And number 3 is approval of the transfer of a surplus police vehicle to the Corrales Fire Department. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Waldman. Any questions or discussion? Yes, Councilor Murray.
Yeah, Mayor, I wanted to pull the property reports if we could, but I just have a couple quick questions. I just want to know that the vehicles are fully functional and in good repair that are being transferred.
Okay, I think that's one for our police chief.
Hello, Councilor Murray, Mayor and Council. Both vehicles actually do need a little bit of work. However, the recipients are aware. The police vehicle being transferred to Hemis Springs is having some air conditioning issues. Not as needed up in the Springs as down here this time of year. And then the vehicle being transferred to the fire department has a little bit of an engine knock, and the fire chief said that he's more than willing to have a look at that and see how much he's willing to invest in that vehicle. But the remainder of both vehicles are fully operational.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Chief.
You're welcome. Councilor Lucero, did you have something that you wanted to ask?
You know, I did. Chief, that we have you here. Just out of curiosity, why Hemis Springs? Just out of curiosity.
Councilor Lucero, Mayor and Council, they requested the vehicle. They do have a need for it. And we no longer do. The vehicle is surplus here. We have an excellent working relationship with the Hemis Springs Police Department, conduct a lot of joint training with their agency. We just completed our night handgun qualifications with their personnel and are getting ready to do our day qualifications and biennium firearms training. So it's based on their needing the vehicle, our not needing it anymore, and our ongoing professional relationship.
Great. That's awesome. I appreciate that partnership you guys have established with them. That's great. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Council.
Any more discussion before we take a vote on the consent agenda? All right, I have a motion and a second, so I'm now going to take a roll call vote. Councilor Waldman?
Sorry, aye.
Councilor Murray?
Aye.
Councilor Burkett?
Aye.
Councilor Lucero?
Aye.
Councilor Knight?
Aye.
Councilor Parker?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to old business, which is consideration, action, and approval of Resolution 21-32. This is a resolution adopting the 2023-2027 infrastructure capital improvement plans. That is our ICIP list. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Councilor Burkett. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Knight. Discussion? Okay, then, we'll be moving on with the process. You'll be getting a lot more information about it, and we will be discussing this with the legislature for the upcoming session. Yes, Councilor Waldman?
Yes, Mayor and councilors, there is an item that's been added with a long explanation from the Friends of the Krause Library about an annex. I had a long talk with the director of the Friends, Christy Gilbert, and she submitted this for consideration. It's on the list number 16.
Okay.
I think perhaps in another meeting, we could discuss this as possible funding directly from the village rather than from the state. It is the price tag on it is about $180,000. They have raised $90,000 in trusts and contributions. I think once this is made public, continued funds will roll in. And I think it's something we know how long it's taken for the current ICIP list to be funded. And I think this would be a tremendous asset to the community and something that we might want to consider discussing at a future meeting for possible direct funding from the village. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilor Woolman. And I do want to point out that, we do have various sources of funds, and I think that's absolutely right. We will see what's on that list and see what we can get the monies for and from what source. But all right, so I think we have a motion, a second. Is there more discussion, or should we move for a vote? All right, I'm going to actually call for a vote then. Councilor Waldman?
Aye.
Councilor Murray?
Aye.
Councilor Burkett?
Aye.
Councilor Lucero?
Aye.
Councilor Knight?
Aye.
Councilor Parker?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to new business under item K. This is basically a clean and lean proposal on 58 Ringcon Road. I think I'm going to ask Ms. Stout to speak to this item first, please.
Thank you, Mayor, councilors. The ongoing problem at 58 Rincon's been happening since before I've been here, but in 2018, I was approached by some neighbors. And at that time, we didn't have a code enforcement officer, but through the whole court system, it's now gone to Code Enforcement Officer Rice, and it's gone through the whole adjudication process. The man who lives there was ordered to clean it up. He was fined. There was even a warrant. Nothing happened. We were allowed on the property at one point, and I will tell you, if you've not seen it, it's difficult to walk on the property. It is so crammed full of, I believe at the date that we were on there, we counted 16 junked cars and just piles of metal, and it's beyond belief. So we've taken it as far as we can through the municipal court system with no success. And the neighbors, especially the one who was courageous enough to come to court and testify, that they want some relief.
Thank you. Aaron, did the property owners wish to speak?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I had two folks sign up. The first on my list is Brian Rothman.
Okay, Mr. Rothman, there's going to be a 3-minute limit here, so please go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay. We did sell the property to Mr. Glover completely devoid of any trash on the whole property. It was completely cleaned when we sold it to him. Just want to put that on the record.
Okay, thank you.
I support what the council is doing. I've asked Mr. Glover to clean it multiple times to no avail. So I understand you guys have to do what you have to do.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That's it, yeah.
Aaron?
Yes, and then Mr. Zachariah Glover also signed up. So Mr. Glover, if you would unmute yourself.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes.
So I have made quite a bit of progress. I've gotten rid of probably 8 vehicles. I got rid of all those coolers, and I have been making progress. I'm not sure why you all think I haven't been. Also, most of what is still here is all behind a 6-foot fence. And according to the village code, I'm allowed to have stuff behind my fence, and as long as it's not seen by the public. So I'm not sure why that is an issue.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Glover. Appreciate your input. Ms. Stout?
In addition to just the vehicles and the piles of metal and so forth, there are about 2, I think there are 2 large unpermitted Connex containers and other unpermitted accessory structures on the property that need to be removed.
Thank you very much. Mr. Audio, would you explain to the council how this process will work if they do pass this clean and lean resolution?
Yes, Mayor and councilors, this, as Ms. Stout already said, is not turned to lightly by the village. It is not done frequently, but this condition on the property has existed for years. In Mr. Glover's statement, he said that he can have what he wishes on the other side of a 6-foot fence. That is simply not the fact. You can do outdoor storage, but you cannot keep a property in a condition that creates a hazard for neighbors and public, and a potential for fire, rodents, and other things that can live in a dilapidated wreck. I think Lori can provide you more information if you need it. What will happen with this resolution is simply that he is given 10 days from the passage of the resolution to begin the process of remediating the property. If he does not, then we have the authority to clean the property ourselves. The village does. Put a lien on the property for the cost of cleaning the property up. And then if the amount of the lien is not paid off, we can foreclose on that lien. So this is really a very inclusive remedy. And I believe that in the facts presented by Ms. Stout in the resolution, it is appropriate.
Thank you very much. Do any of the councilors have a question for Ms. Stout or Mr. Audio? Councilor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor, councilors. Randy and Ms. Stout, is there a timeline after that 10-day notification that you must comply with?
Lori, I'll go ahead and take that one. Councilor Murray. So if the property owner was to make, for example, present us a contract with a company to haul off everything on the property within that 10 days, or make significant arrangements, we can enter into an agreement with the property owner to allow him more time to complete that. But in this particular instance, there's been many years of delay and failure to get everything cleaned off the property. But if that was to happen, if there was a significant effort to clean it, we could give the property owner more time to complete that.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? All right, thank you. I'm going to ask for a motion, if I may, to approve this item, Resolution 2133. Do I have a motion? Yes, Mr. Parker, Councilor Parker.
Mayor Roque, councilors, I did have a question for Mr. Audio on this before we move forward with this. So it's my understanding, if in situations like this, if we vote on it, the property owner will have the opportunity to rectify the situation, and the next steps would not have to move forward. Is it, during the notification, is it made clear exactly to what extent the cleanup has to get to prevent that from happening? The next steps, I mean?
That's a good question. Yes, Councilor Parker, that would be done. The second thing to keep in mind is if the property owner wishes to appeal the decision that's entered on the resolution, if the council was to pass the resolution, the property owner may appeal it within 10 days, and it would be set for a hearing before the governing body on his appeal of the determination by council that this clean and lean needed to be done. So that is another part of the due process required by state law.
Okay, good. I just wanted to verify that he does have a chance to mediate this before the next steps take place.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Absolutely. All right, are there any more questions before I ask for a motion to approve this resolution? All right, hearing none, do I have a motion to approve? Councilor Lucero, was that you?
Move approval, Mayor.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Councilor Waldman. All right, I'm going to take a roll call vote. Councilor Waldman,
Aye.
Councilor Murray,
Aye.
Councilor Burkett,
Aye.
Councilor Lucero,
Aye.
Councilor Knight,
Aye.
Councilor Parker.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Hope this can be worked out. Okay, number 2 is consideration, action, and direction from the governing body to proceed on the Village of Corrales, Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District, and State Forestry Department Invasive Species Clearing Project Work Plan. I'm going to ask Chief Martinez to speak to this item, please.
Good evening, Mayor, Councilor, Administrator Curry. Thank you for this opportunity. Bringing to you tonight a work plan. It's in the draft form for consideration, action, and direction. This is something I've been working on with the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy. It all started back in October 9th of 2020 when we had a Bosque fire along the Levee Road. During that time, you know, we had to put contingency plans together to try to have a strategy how we're going to rapidly move vehicles because they're being threatened by, you know, vegetation really close to the levee. I contacted Mike Hammond, discussed my concerns pertaining to public safety and firefighter safety, and trying to see if there was something that we can do. As you know, my department's been obligated, you know, tasked to do maintenance along, you know, in the Bosque in conjunction with permission with the landowner, MRGCD, and I seek funds to the Mexico State Forestry to help fund these responsibilities that the Village of Corrales has. This is a new project plan. We have standing plans for shaded fuel break maintenance, dead and down, Revanagrass. It's a similar type of contract. Instead of employing state forestry contractors or inmates, we could employ volunteer firefighters. When I do kind of screen, when we do project work, I try to ask the citizens of the community, you know, the type of work we're doing. They seem to be satisfied. At the end of the day, we own it. Again, when I brought this up to Conservancy, I was unaware of, levee flooding concerns. So I do have Yasmin. I believe she logged in online. She's here representing the district, Mike Hammond, and also State Forestry. So we're here to answer any questions the council may have. Again, it sounds like a lot. When you drive down the levee road, there are areas with heavy brush, and there are areas that are already cleared out that would require very minimal maintenance. And we're only talking about invasive species. We've responded probably over the last year, probably to 5 large dead cottonwood trees. Some of them impacted the levee road. Others just kind of fell along in that area. So.
All right, thank you, Chief.
And for any questions.
All right. Do I have questions for Chief from counselors? Yes, Councilor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry, I don't want to jump in and lead off, but Chief, so when you talk about invasive species, are we talking about salt cedar and Russian olive and things like that that suck a lot of water up out of the bosque?
Yes, salt cedar, Russian olive, tree of heaven, elm. Now the work plan says, clear out all invasive species within that 20 feet. However, in past projects, if there's a mature elm and it looks like it's standing, I would probably say I'm going to leave it, because we're seeing a lot of dead cottonwood dying in our bosque. And I'm not an expert, but I'm afraid that, we have to keep some of this elm if we want to keep some shade.
Okay. Other questions for Chief Martinez? Yes, Councilor Knight.
Thank you, Mayor. What will happen to the wood that's gathered from the bosque?
I'm sorry, Councilor Knight, I didn't hear that.
What do you plan to do with the wood and the scraps from all the trees in the bosque?
Councilor Knight, we want to provide the chips to the district. I know they have a need. We could provide chips hopefully to citizens. With this plan, I want to haul out everything. I know in the past we've had wood piles kind of piled along the levee, but I took it away. We gave a lot of it away during COVID to multiple pueblos throughout the state of New Mexico. We just can't, there's just a lot of dead and down and a lot of wood. So we hope to haul it out, chip it, and find a source for it and not leave it there.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councilor Lucero.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. How big is the area? I think you mentioned, how big is the area you are looking to remediate?
So it's roughly 20 feet from the riverside toe of the levee, 20 feet to the east towards the river. So 20 feet. The length is from Siphon. We identified the project work area from Siphon all the way to Alameda. However, we targeted this project to identify the full length, but we may not get to it this year. We want to identify and prioritize the areas with heavy vegetation and mitigate those as quickly as possible, and then focus on the rest of it. My strategy on this is similar to the hydrant project on Loma Larga, where I got into a lease agreement for hydrants. So it gives me the opportunity to play with based on, crew availability, weather, etc.
Thank you, Chief.
Any other questions from counselors at this point? All right, Aaron, do we have someone who'd like to speak to this item?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I had 3 people sign up for this item, and the first on this list is Mary Chappelle.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and Administrator Curry. My name is Mary Chappelle, a resident of Corrales residing at 26 Don Tomas, as well as a member of the Bosque Advisory Commission and a person who enjoys the Bosque. And I'm feeling a little bit like David versus Goliath right now. We all know that the Corrales Bosque is an important part of Corrales and our life here. It's a place that's provided for recreation, observation of the natural world, enjoyment of the outdoors, which is only minutes away from the busy life of the city that's next to us, and provides a natural habitat for many living creatures. It's my understanding that the proposal that is coming before you tonight is a sweeping plan to eliminate substantial vegetation within 20 feet of the east side of the toe of the levee, which includes Russian olive, elm trees, as well as salt cedar and tree of heaven. My concern is the resulting substantial habitat loss in the bosque, as well as tree cover that provides shade and positively impacts our rising temperatures. The Russian olive trees are a substantial and important source of food for the birds that populate our bosque, both during nesting season and migration. And whether we like it or not, the Russian olive is here and has become part of our landscape, even though it is not a native species. The wildlife have adapted to it and benefit from it. However, in the past, we have heard statements from the Forestry Service stating its intent to remove all Russian olive, and this seems to be a step towards that goal. Clearing, as identified in the proposal, would remove wide areas, as I've observed, 30 to 50 feet wide, leaving gaping holes in the bosque, as well as leaving openings that invite traffic along the side of the levee, which has always been discouraged by MRGCD and the fire department. When the Corrales Bosque was nominated as an important birding area, that nomination noted the Corrales Bosque Preserve also includes substantial shrubby edge habitat along the edge of the forested habitat by the river or the levee, in forest openings within the preserve and along the levee road, as well as the Corrales Riverside Drain and Sandoval Lateral. It went on to state there is scientific evidence of the uniqueness of and biodiversity supported by the Corrales Bosque. And it cited a report from Hawks Aloft that said, they suggest that the management strategy used in the Corrales Bosque Preserve is the most beneficial to avifauna of all the management types they studied. And that certainly did not include this wide clearing. The Bosque management guidelines, which the council approved, did not foresee or aim at removal of all non-native species. While it aimed at a preference for native species, it certainly knew that we were going to be looking at having non-natives in our area as well. The commission and myself are well aware of the need to balance fire protection and the natural state of the bosque. In fact, the commission itself has gone out. This Saturday will be the third time to work on removal of the Ravenna grass that has spread throughout the bosque and is not beneficial to anything there. My question is if this proposal is so great, so wonderful, why the commission was not provided with it and allowed to discuss it. We have not been given the opportunity to fully review the proposal, to discuss options within the proposal or alternatives, and basically to do our due diligence about the details of the proposal and how we might better balance these goals. I'm asking that the proposal not be accepted at this time without substantially more time for an adequate review of all the details, because once it is implemented, there is no turning back. Deferring a decision will be consistent with the mission of the Village of Corrales in creating the Corrales Bosque Preserve is to preserve and protect the natural and native conditions, habitat, and wildlife in the preserve in order to ensure that an increasing human population does not adversely affect or otherwise change the Rio Grande Bosque within the village, leaving no areas preserved and protected in their natural condition. At a bare minimum, I would ask that mature olive trees be left and not be removed, and that native species not be impacted by an attempt to remove non-natives.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And that any limitations be in writing in the plan.
Thank you. All right, who's up next? Thank you very much. All right.
Yes, Madam Mayor, the next individual is Joan Morrison.
Good evening. I hope you
Go
can hear
ahead.
me.
Yes, I certainly can.
My name is Joan Morrison. I'm a resident of Corrales at 390 Ringcon Road. I have a PhD in wildlife ecology, and I currently serve on the Corrales Bosque Advisory Commission. Owing to its high biodiversity, the preserve was designated as a protected area in 1978 and as an important bird area in 2013. The village of Corrales is tasked with maintaining it as a natural area and wildlife preserve, according to the ordinance. At least one endangered bird and one other avian species of concern nest in the area. The preserve is also an important stopover habitat for many migrating birds that pass through on their ways north and south, and it provides habitat for wintering bald eagles. That said, considerable concern and attention should be given to any proposal that seeks to make major changes to the landscape, habitat, or natural condition of the Bosque Preserve. The task of the commission is to evaluate proposed work in the Bosque and to obtain work permits submitted by those proposing work. The advisory commission was not informed of this proposal until our meeting last week on Thursday. We were not given a copy of the proposal or a map showing proposed work areas or any justification of the project. To our knowledge, no work permit application required for anyone wanting to work in the Bosque has been submitted. In March 2021, the council approved the Bosque Management Guidelines prepared by our Bosque Advisory Commission. These guidelines are meant to foster data-driven decisions in collaboration with the goal of protecting and preserving a variety of habitats in order to maintain a biologically diverse ecosystem of wildlife populations and plant communities. Concerns about this proposed project that conflict with these guidelines include the following. Riparian habitat is particularly important for avian communities in the arid Southwest. Thus, damage and removal of this habitat will highly impact bird and other animal diversity. Apparently, the project intends to remove all of the invasive Russian olive. As Mary said, this species provides valuable food resources for animal birds, particularly in the winter months. The local organization Hawks Aloft has conducted bird surveys and other research in the Bosque Preserve for many years. They were not informed of this proposal either until yesterday morning. Their research has documented over 35 species feeding on or breeding in Russian olive in the Bosque. And we don't know whether or not this proposal even addresses the value of Russian olive to wildlife. Hawks Aloft also has researched transects from the south end to the north end of the Corrales Bosque. And we don't know whether proposal contains any language addressing the commitment to preserve those transects when the work is being done. Apparently, the intent of the project is to leave native trees, but if machinery is used to remove invasives and clear areas, won't that disturb the root systems of already stressed cottonwoods, causing further harm and loss to these natives? Apparently, there is no estimate of actual tree loss in this proposal. Most of the mature cottonwoods in the Bosque are in senescence. And if non-natives are removed, there will be nothing left other than isolated dying cottonwoods. And this proposal apparently offers no plan to actually restore the vegetation community in areas that are disturbed. In some stretches of distance along the levee, there are only Russian olives growing, so removal of them would leave those areas completely bare and devoid of any habitat. Large-scale removal of trees and other vegetation, especially along the sloped levee, will lead to erosion, which will lead to even more intrusion of invasives that love disturbed areas, such as Ravenna grass, which badly outcompetes native vegetation. This has been a really good year for berry production of the native New Mexico olive, and clearing as proposed by this project would likely damage much of that habitat. The Rio Rancho Bosque, where removal of all non-native species has already occurred, provides evidence of outcomes of these types of actions. Their bosque has the lowest avian species abundance and diversity of all terrestrial vegetation communities other than monotypic stands of salt cedar. Apparently, this proposal has come forth before, with earlier versions proposing removal of all vegetation within 15 feet of the levee toe. This proposal has now been expanded to removal within 20 feet, and we wonder why the change. Expanded removal will only worsen the consequences. The Bosque Advisory Commission understands the need to balance wildfire and wildlife concerns, but without the opportunity to see this proposal or any justification, we are very concerned about how it intends to address this balance, if at all. Council members, I urge you to put off making a decision on this proposal, which would allow the Bosque Commission and some biologists and ecologists to learn details of the project, provide a thorough review, and also provide input. As was stated earlier, we would welcome the opportunity to work with the fire department, the Conservancy, and others to develop a collaborative compromise approach. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Aaron?
And the last person I have on my list is Joan Hashimoto.
Thank you. Go ahead, Joan.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor, Council, members of the public. I'm going to be repetitive, I'm afraid, but I just want to say that last Thursday evening, the members of the CBAC were presented verbally with an outline of this proposal that seemed to be a done deal with it on the council agenda for tonight. The chief had mentioned in passing that he was working on a vegetation clearing project along the levee at the August meeting. At CBAC meetings, many potential projects are mentioned. It was easy to assume that his was in the distant future. The expectation of mentioned projects is that a plan will be presented when available. In the Bosque management guidelines, which the council signed off on earlier this year, collaboration and data were important aspects. We'd like to follow this process and would like to understand the magnitude of the project. How many trees are involved? Acres of land can be tree dense or empty. Proportions of specific invasive tree age and condition. We could get a sampling of different 20-foot by 100-foot areas along the levee toe, and then discuss with biologists and ecologists the possible impact issues. Then consider both sides of the proposal. We need time to do this, and we're not afforded any. Please consider postponing any decision until the first council meeting of October, when we could report findings back to you. You've heard about birds in the preserve, and yes, they are one class of animals, but they are most easily quantifiable, and bird numbers and diversity are considered a measure of habitat and forest health. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Chief, do you have anything you'd like to add at this time, or would you like to have somebody from Forestry or the Conservancy respond regarding the scope of the project?
Mayor, I would, yeah, if Yasmin or Mike Hammond would like to give a description from the Conservancy standpoint, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Mike, why don't you go ahead and talk about the importance of the levee and levee maintenance?
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, members of the Corrales Bosque Advisory Commission. Yes, we've spoken many times, I think, with village staff and also with the Bosque Commission in the past about the need to properly maintain the levee and have at least within a 5-foot distance of the toe as prescribed by the Corps of Engineers. And but then there's a question of access to continue that degree of maintenance. And I think that's why the plan calls for developing a strategy to address the large woody vegetation that is non-native in nature to try to alleviate the maintenance concerns, long-term maintenance concerns that we know we need to address over time. And we've developed an excellent working relationship with the village through Anthony and his crew, and they have an opportunity to take advantage of some New Mexico forestry funding opportunities. And I think the mosaic that's been laid out does respect the need to maintain a habitat corridor in that area, but we do need to ultimately address the maintenance needs to maintain integrity of that levee system. It's been noted in Corps of Engineers inspections in the past that that's a problem from a certification perspective. We've had conversations with the Corps. They've granted us waivers in that regard over time to address it, but we want to work closely with the village and the Bosque Advisory Commission to continue to strike a good balance in that area. I'd also like to ask Yasmin Najmi, who's studied the plan in more detail, to provide some comments from her perspective. And I understand she's also been in discussions with Hoxaloff folks as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Yasmin?
Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Mayor, for giving us some time to speak on this. You know, I think Mike provided the Conservancy District's perspective. You know, we basically have very little, in some places, no access to the levee on Riverside Toe, which is a real problem from a maintenance and certification perspective. I'm not going to dispute anything that was said here tonight. In fact, I agree with much of what was said from a habitat perspective. We know that Russian olives do provide good habitat. We know we have a lot of Russian olives throughout the Corrales Bosque, not just along the levee, and as well as many other types of trees. So, you know, we have been in touch with Hoxaloff about the transects. We will work closely with them, you know, to minimize the incursions as much as we can. But again, trying to create some of the access that we need to the levee. We have already agreed not to remove all vegetation, which would be the ideal situation, obviously, for protecting the levee. But because we don't want to remove natives, if we don't have to, we've agreed not to do that. Although it's a little bit more problematic for us. But the non-natives, especially in a fire, are especially dangerous. They're dangerous for emergency crews and access. They do cause damage to the levee, and they are spreading. So, you know, I think this is work that we need to do, and we can do it as carefully as possible. And, you know, this 15-foot zone to the levee, I mean, that is sort of the equivalent of what you find on the levee road itself and the green road that provides access to maintain these types of facilities. You know, that levee has been there since the 1930s, long time. And, you know, this is what we need. You know, this is the kind of space that we need to maintain it. You know, our maintenance of these facilities don't require, you know, special types of environmental clearances and those types of things.
Okay. Thank you. Do any of the counselors have questions for either the CEO of the Conservancy, Mr. Hammond, or for Yasmin? Do I see? I don't know if anybody, yes, I think Counselor Knight is attempting to ask a question here.
Well, I don't know if it would be specifically towards those two guests that we have tonight, but if we did wait another month so that the Corrales Bosque Advisory Commission could review and go through the paperwork, I think that would be a positive thing. Just because that commission has done a lot of work, and I think we need to take that into consideration as far as all the work they've put in past years, and also Joan's brought up that we passed a resolution about how we would conduct things that went on in the Bosque. So I don't think another month, maybe Chief Martinez can help me with this, would another month be putting you way behind if we had the Corrales Bosque Advisory Commission look at this?
Mayor, Councilor Knight. So I guess I'm a little confused myself. So I kind of briefed the Corrales Bosque Advisory Commission. I consider myself kind of a liaison. I go to their meetings. I try to attend every one of their meetings. I try to address issues that they bring up in the meetings, and I try to make them happen. You know, whether it's maintenance issues, trash issues, This one I felt was directly between Conservancy and the Village of Corrales, all due respect. So I guess to answer your question, if we need to wait a month and so we can review it, my fear is this is something that we need to, take care of. Again, I'm talking on the matter of public safety. I need a schedule, logistics to try to get this work done. I have roughly 6 months to do any sort of project work or maintenance work in the Bosque until I get into nesting season. I just don't want to be, this plan was designed for this fall and not in 2022. So that's just my concern. I mean, if we can move and come to some sort of resolution fairly quickly to meet the objective, then I'm okay with that.
I think, thank you, Chief. And I think that Mr. Haynes from the Forestry Division had something he wished to say. Mr. Haynes?
Yeah, hey, this is Todd Haynes. I'm the district forester for Bernalillo District, New Mexico State Forestry. It's a 8-county area, central western part of the state. I was going to start with a little bit of history on what's going on with state forestry and the Bosque River system, and then get into some specifics that might help alleviate some of the questions you guys got. The Rio Grande River system is named one of the top 10 priority landscapes by New Mexico State Forestry and all the collaboration in the recent forest action plan. So we actually had our state forester address the Bosque Commission, I think it was 2 months ago, sometime in the middle of summer. I lost track because we had a crazy fire season, and just stating all those objectives. So basically in my district, we have 3 counties, Sandoval County, Bernalillo County, and Valencia County, that we're trying to do various projects on the Bosque. In this particular case, we had a bunch of funds sent down from our, what's called FARA, Forest Watershed Health Restoration Act funding, and then some capital funding that we're putting on up to 6 different projects, and we have 8 projects going on now. Some of the stuff we're doing in Corrales, we're responding a lot to the Sandia Pueblo, and there was a Ravenna grass project. I'm not sure if everybody's aware, but we funded it was like $40,000 of Ravenna grass removal in the Corrales Bosque last year, which the fire department completed. They went basically from the Rio Rancho Corrales boundary all the way down, almost all the way to Alameda, which is 100% directly across from the Sandia Pueblo, and that was by their request. I think the city manager, mayor, everybody, all of us went over to the Sandia Pueblo and started working on cross-boundary stuff. So this project, there's one spot of Ravenna grass near the Boy Scout Bridge, which we left because we tried to graze it with goats and see how it responded. Doing some follow-up, we didn't like how it responded, so we're not going to use goats for Ravenna grass. We're going to do it the old-fashioned way. So with this proposal, I just wanted to clarify, this is a draft proposal. Everybody seems to be thinking that this is some kind of thing that needs to be passed tonight. We're not through the draft process. We just went with Anthony from Corrales, and I guess he took it to the Bosque Commission meeting to get an input. We also got some inputs from Yasmin and Mike on what was going on. And so, we already made some changes based on the Middle Rio Grande's inputs. And so just for a little math, 20 feet out from the levee is 2.4 acres per mile. So there's approximately 7.5 to 8 miles of Corrales Bosque. So that's 2.4 acres per mile, and that's going out 20 feet. We added a few acres to the draft of this project proposal to account for where it goes into a fire break. We didn't want to have it at a right angle where it would look ridiculous. We were trying to, and the wording we use in the proposal is to feather it in. That way it kind of blends into the landscape and doesn't have this like sharp angle that cuts into the existing fuel breaks. Outside of this, we were in negotiations with Hawks Aloft to see if we had a way of hiring them to both continue their transects, because we actually use their transect data when we're doing different Bosque things, and to have maybe a more rapid response when we need information on migratory birds really fast so we can have these projects geared up. So yeah, it's of interest to us to have these the transects, preserved in that manner, because if those are the guys doing it, that's the guys we want to kind of get involved and provide us that data, so we're not doing crazy things. And as far as openings and closings in the Bosque, I'm just gonna say it out loud. We want all types of habitat, and that includes open grassland. There's open grassland species of birds, ducks, dabbling ducks, that also use that. You can't have just this monotype of thick trees everywhere. That's not habitat. That might be optimal habitat for birds, but it's not. Just like, you say there's has the highest density of bird population in the Rio Grande Bosque. Well, the highest density of people population is in New York City, but people in Corrales don't want to live in New York City. You want an optimal density, not a high density. And optimal density is kind of what we're looking at doing. Same thing, the bird, one of the birds of concern is the willow flycatcher. It's not called the salt cedar flycatcher. We want to eventually provide the willow, the mature willow that the willow flycatcher has developed with over time, by slowly replacing high stands of flammable, invasive, water-sucking salt cedar, Russian olive into the optimal habitat of the willow. And that's kind of what we're looking at. And I almost, just listening to some of the comments, almost get the perspective that some people think we're trying to go out and rape and pillage the Bosque, but we're really not. I've been in forestry for 32 years. If guaranteed, I want to recreate and do everything everybody else does, and I think everybody on my staff does, and everybody that's working with this does. So this is a draft project proposal. We're open for discussion, but we do have nesting season, August 15th to April 15th. We have to shut down during nesting season, after that. And it always seems we get to this stage of the year when we do these proposals, we come to the commissions, and there's always some kind of delay. And it's almost like it's a surprise every time that state forestry has money. We always get money for this. We're always trying to do this. And we always ask to get ahead of the game and do these proposals. 20 feet out from the levee, the Army Corps, just kind of approved the practice, 2.4 acres per mile. And, I could answer any of the questions with that, but it is part of the big forest action plan. We're doing things adjacent to Rio Rancho and in Albuquerque, across the river at Sandia Pueblo, and down in Valencia County. We just had a project in Valencia County this year. We were 3/4 of the way done, and an area that we preserved burned, nuked out, and we were trying to preserve bird habitat, and that bird habitat just got wiped out. Now we're going to test our skills on Bosque rehabilitation and see how that goes. But that's not how I want to test our skills. I want to test it on preserving the habitat and preserving the Bosque. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilor Murray, I think you have a question for Mr. Haynes.
Well, I think, yeah, I'm not sure if you can answer this. And I don't want to be I don't want to harp on birds and the riparian habitat, but invasive species like salt cedar and Russian olive, they suck up a lot of water. Do you have an estimate on how much water you're going to save by taking these invasive species out?
There's a lot of studies on that, and you can use the things that everybody says in public. I don't think they're accurate. That a mature salt cedar can evapotranspirate up to 200 gallons in a year, in a day. I'm not sure what the validity of that is, but it's definitely a lot, and it also deposits salts into the soil. But yeah, trying to get those. In general, trying to get those natural habitats slowly transform back into that thing over time. You don't want to do it all in 1 year, because then you're really destroying what you're trying to preserve. But there's some areas, there's some in, somebody said Rio Rancho, and somebody said down in Valencia County, there are some nice stands of willows that we try to replicate. And on a lot of the pueblos, they have a lot of, if you go to Sandia Pueblo and look at some of the stuff they're doing over there, it's amazing. And I know people aren't allowed to bird over there because it's a sovereign nation, but I'm allowed to go over there because we're doing projects, and what they're doing is amazing. We've done this with Rio Rancho residents. We took them down to Bosque del Apache and a lot of the Socorro County projects and other projects and took them on a field trip, and everybody showed off what they're doing. Once you see all the stuff that everybody else is doing and how it works, you become a lot more comfortable with the process and a lot less, hesitant and scared about what we're doing. And we did it for some of the Rio Rancho council or park staff and residents. And if you guys want to do it, I'm sure we can get you on the Pueblo and see some of the stuff they're doing.
But aren't the levees, aren't they a fairly recent thing? I mean, we're talking 1930s. Before that, I've seen pictures of the Rio Grande and it looks totally bare because the river was allowed to wander all over the place and the trees never got to establish their the root system. So how do you think that impacts habitat? I mean, for birds, I mean, we've been having birds flying up and down the Rio Grande corridor for years.
As a levy question, I'm going to let one of the MRGCD people answer that.
Well, Councilor Murray, certainly there are many more trees in the Bosque in many places than there were historically, and that's because of the flood control efforts and the canalization of the river stabilized that area so that there was less flooding and a lot more trees could get established. So, a lot of the Bosque you see today is really a remnant, especially of some of the last big floods we had like in 1941. So those trees are senescing, as has been pointed out. They're getting older and many of them are starting to die off. What we're aiming for in the Bosque, and I think the Village of Corrales folks agree with this, and I think it's present in the habitat management plan, is to have more of a mosaic of different types of plant communities, which includes some denser areas, with layered habitats, grasslands, wetlands, some open areas, things that serve different types of wildlife and different types of bird species, but also, help lessen some of the fire risk in the Bosque, help lessen some of the pressure on the water, as we've had lower river flows and less water supplies. That's an issue for the Bosque, and we have to look at how to adapt that in the future. Adaptation means we may have more non-natives in the future, and we're going to have to figure out how to manage that and what that means. So, I understand some of the concerns about the habitat. I think this is an opportunity to diversify some of that, at the same time create more safety for the public, and also help us, to be able to maintain the levee properly. We certainly have had water up against the levee. In 2019 and 2017, we did a lot of flood fighting in parts of the district. When we had those high flows, and that can happen again. We've lost a lot of channel capacity in the river. So when, we're getting overbanking flows at basically lower volumes of water. And those are things that we really have to pay attention to. We want to make sure that folks in the Village of Corrales don't have to get flood insurance, and so we've got to start taking care of some of this deferred maintenance, and we want to do it in the best way possible. I think we've had a good relationship with the Bosque Commission and the village. We've listened, the Corps of Engineers has listened. When we did our Bosque restoration projects, we made a lot of accommodations, and we're gonna do the right things, as much as we can.
Thank you.
We did talk to Hoxaloft as well, and I talked to Trevor, and he didn't have too many concerns with the proposal. I mean, I think he brought up the issue of some of the Russian olive, but other than that, he was willing to work with us on this project.
So I'm looking at the item itself. It says consideration, action, and direction from the governing body to proceed on the Village of Corrales Conservancy and State Forestry project, which I think Mr. Haynes has clarified is still in a somewhat of a draft form, but there is clearly a 6-month window in which to sort of move forward in some effort to balance safety and, from what I'm understanding, overdue maintenance with trying to preserve the habitat that is so important to everyone. So at this point, I'm open to a suggestion as to how we go ahead and accommodate that while not, falling off the ability to do any progress these upcoming months before nesting season starts again. So yes, Zach, Councilor Burkett.
I would suggest that everybody here who's spoken for and against acting on this immediately has the best interests at heart. And it doesn't sound like a delay of 4 weeks is going to significantly stall this project. I think the value of having a Bosque Advisory Commission is to let them advise us on things that maybe we missed in our analysis of this. I think Councilor Knight had a similar thought. If Chief Martinez is not opposed to it, I would suggest we give the Bosque Advisory Commission 4 weeks and bring this back as an action item, first meeting in October, and act on it swiftly so they can get started.
All right. I think, can I take that as a motion?
A very succinct one.
Yes, a very succinct motion. And I think there'd be a second from Councilor Knight.
Right.
So basically the motion is to give the Bosque Commission 4 weeks in which to work with the other agencies and give input, and then it will become an action item in the first meeting in October. Is that a correct summary?
That is correct, assuming that Chief Martinez does not think that in any way inhibits this from being a successful mission. I want that to be clear, that if he thinks that derails this thing, then it's up for reassessment.
All right, Chief, you're on the hot seat, as it were.
Sorry.
No, I agree. I think we can work. We just have to get together and discuss all the options. I just don't want to see a delay. I'm really hard, as you know, trying to facilitate all the needs and make it safer. And but I feel confident we can work together and come up with a solution.
Great, then we'll see this. I'm going to take a vote. Yes, Administrator Curry.
Yes, Mayor, the only thing that I ask for everyone to keep in mind that what the chief is trying to do and what the Conservancy District is trying to do and the State Forestry is trying to do is to manage the risk that we have as a village in the Bosque, which is an important concept for us all to understand. And the chief and I have spent many minutes, hours talking about this particular issue. And the chief moves forward trying to manage the risk that we have, not only from a liability point of view, but from an environmental point of view as we move into the Bosque. So we welcome any comments that come from the Bosque Commission, but we welcome them through the lens of risk.
Thank you. All right. I think that we're going to expect to see this as an action item. And if you are in agreement with that, I will now take a voice vote on that. Councilor Waldman?
Mayor Roque, I had a comment before we vote on this.
I'm sorry, Councilor Parker, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe the question needs to be for the Bosque Advisory Commission. Do they need a full month to go through this, or can they get on this faster than that?
I don't know the answer to that question. I guess I can ask, and I'm not sure that this is appropriate, but I can ask Joan if they think they can do it faster than that, or we can make the village administration can reach out to them and see when they think they could get the information to us.
Yeah, it just seems like if we can get stuff moving faster, it seems like if we don't need to use that full month, let's not use the full month and try to expedite things, because as was indicated, there's although there is a great importance with the Bosque itself, there is this issue of fire along the Bosque. And as I drive across the river today, seeing Rio Grande slowly dying up, I think it's a very real issue that needs to be addressed as quickly as possible. So anyway.
Thank you, Councilor Parker. We will take that into account and do our best to, I'm sorry, I think maybe Mr. Haynes wanted to say something again. I'm trying here.
I'm sorry, just to keep in mind, we also need time for legal review. So like if, say, the Bosque Commission would come up with edits and different things and everybody can live with it, we have to put it through our legal before we're allowed to present it to the entities. And so if we could get most of that pre-reviewed and worked out before that, I could have you a final product at your next meeting. But that's a little bit tough. So I do have to go through our steps too, which sometimes makes it seem like we're jamming something at you. I had to do a draft plan in order to get it to you to present to the Bosque Commission. And that's why I kept saying it's a draft.
No, thank you for giving us that perspective. I mean, you know, we are dealing, there are a lot of agencies here. Everybody's trying to do the right thing. So I guess to follow up with Councillor Parker's admonitions, let's see how fast we can get the Bosque Commission to give us their edits so that it could go through legal at forestry, and we could have something that then the governing body will really be able to look at the earliest possibility. But it sounds like for Todd to get everything through legal, we really are looking at the first meeting in October. I don't think it could be done probably before that, knowing how these things are. But if everybody can work in good faith to get their objections, their suggestions, their hopes for improvements to the draft plan, if the commission could do that for us, so that the body will be able to move on in October with the plan. Okay, so I'm going to take a voice vote now. Councillor Waldman?
Aye.
Mayor,
Yes?
Mayor, Joan Hashimoto had a comment. She had her hand up.
Yes?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I was going to say that I think the commission would need to be able to have the month to evaluate and have a special meeting, because our meeting comes after your meeting in October. Some of us will be out of town. We would need the month to evaluate, consult with experts, and then come back to you on that October meeting.
Right, but I think there is, and I appreciate that, Joan, but I do think that we're hearing that forestry does need to put it through their legal. We do need to get something done. I think probably forestry is considered an expert, as probably is the conservancy. So in trying to balance all the needs, if you or portions of your commission could put together a special meeting or agree to do something earlier, that would be extremely helpful in trying to get all of this put together. And I would really appreciate that. Okay, I'm actually going to cut off comments at this point and take a vote, because I think we all understand that there are a lot of actors involved and that we're trying to do something that's not only in the best interest of the Bosque and the best interest of risk management for our village. So with that, Councillor Waldman, I think you already said aye, but can you do it again for us?
Certainly. Aye.
Councillor Murray?
Aye.
Councillor Burkett?
Aye.
Councillor Lucero?
Aye.
Councillor Knight?
Aye.
Councillor Parker?
Aye.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate, I think it was a really good conversation. And I think thank you to our all the members of the Bosque Commission and the forestry and conservancy folks for coming forward and trying to help so that we'll get this done. Thank you so much, everybody. All right, we're going to move on to the next item, which is a discussion of potential cannabis ordinance amendments. And I am going to turn this over to Randy Audio and Corey, if she's here.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilors, Corey is with us tonight, and I will ask her to go into any details of any questions, because she has been tasked with being the most familiar with these regulations. There is some news. We had forwarded to the village a copy that was produced by the New Mexico Licensing Bureau, which is doing some, quote, emergency regulations of manufacturing facilities. So there have been regulations brought out early. We weren't expecting them until December. So they've been distributed. We'll take a look at them and see if they provide any guidance for us on other issues that a local government could address under those regs. I just wanted to say that as you all know, we spent a lot of time together, staff and attorneys, creating what we thought was a good starting point for the regulation of marijuana under the new cannabis, Recreational Cannabis Act. And so what the issues have arisen, some counselors are putting forth some ideas, and folks are discussing ideas of how we could protect residences and folks living near marijuana producing facilities, which are grows. They're growing facilities. We have the primary issue we have in Corrales that causes this to be more difficult than in some communities is we literally have no industrial or heavy commercial zoning. So in some communities, large warehouse grows have been placed in such zones. We do not have those zones. The only zoning we have in Corrales is H1, H2, historic zoning, and neighborhood commercial. And therefore, we cannot move these uses to other zones and limit them to particular zones. That increases our challenge. So with that, Mayor, I'm not sure how we want to proceed tonight. I think if there's some specific questions from counselors on methodology of what else we could do besides what has already been done, that might be helpful to kick off the conversation, but please direct me in another direction if you wish.
No, I think that's just fine. I think I did want to preface this by saying that I did have a conversation with the executive director of the New Mexico Municipal League today. And of course, he's been, most of his time is taken up with this, I think, at this point. And the news from him is just that, we, like other municipalities, are struggling to do what we can, knowing that our actions are somewhat limited. And as he said to me today, you cannot treat this differently than you would treat tomatoes. And so since we're mostly A1, A2, we are working with that. But I do want to hear from counselors to see, and I know that our legal team is really working this. So if there is a way to make these regulations more protective, that's something that they will absolutely look at. So I think I see Zach, Councilor Burkett.
Yeah, I mean, the analogy to tomatoes, I have a difficult time with. I think we're operating under this false premise that this is like any other crop. You do not see people.
That is what the state, Councilor Burkett, the problem is that's exactly what the state law has said.
But the state law
that
treats it different than another
agricultural
crop.
product.
They're treating it different than other crops. They're not requiring security cameras and fences around tomato farms. And you don't see t-shirts or tattoos of tomatoes. It's a very different crop. So I think we're operating under a false premise that we have to treat this the same as every other crop, when the state is very clearly treating it different than every other crop. And my inclination is we say no in agricultural 1 and agricultural 2, and we see where the cards lay. And my guess is the state's going to have to make some changes to this, because this is a problem that's happening in a lot of municipalities. And once we make that amendment, it stands until it's overruled in court, correct? So it will buy us time to see what changes.
We will be sued. I mean, I talked to AJ about this today. Roswell is doing exactly what you suggest, Zach, and he's explained to them that they will be sued and they will lose. So it just depends on how much money the village wants to put out to defend against this. Now, if Roswell somehow, is able to fight back, then we probably all could piggyback on that. But it is not a very good risk, according to our attorneys, or according to the head of the municipal league and everybody else that I talk to, in terms of our ability to fight back too much. So
Does
anyway,
us taking a similar stance help Roswell? Does multiple municipalities all saying that this is unjust help Roswell? Or do we really want to sit back and let Roswell lead this intellectual battle and win, and then us ride on the coattails of them?
well, I think the chances of winning are pretty slim, but Councilor Murray?
Thank you, Mayor. And I agree with Councilor Burkett that this is not a regular crop by any means. But also I was kind of interested in Mr. Gutierrez comments about our former ordinance 1802 prohibiting NA1 and A2, but allowing in other zones. I mean, obviously we have the commercial and the NCOD as well. So I would be interested in seeing how that would stand, because we're not going to prohibit it in the village altogether, just in these two areas of A1 and A2, which are residential areas. My other question would be for councilors, maybe we ought to consider a moratorium on license applications for, say, 120 days. Give us time to reason out and see what we want to do or need to do. And that way we can at least, have some time to work on this before it becomes law. I mean, they're basically going to start sales April 1st or earlier. It depends on how fast the state moves on this.
Okay.
So I would
Councilor
suggest.
Parker, I got it. I understand your point. Councilor Parker?
Mayor Rowe, councilors, I still think if there's a way for us to put in some type of enforcement, so if a growing facility cannot be prevented from being next to a residential zone, that the smell from that growing does not reach those residences, because if we can do that, then that growing facility, and I know there's other issues involved with this that Councilor Burkett was bringing up, like fences, security cameras, yada, yada. But if we can make it so that these buildings are just buildings with fences around them, I think it's drastically different than buildings with fences that have the continuous odor of cannabis flowing whichever way the wind blows. And then also the idea that if we don't need to make it that we can grow it everywhere, we just have to have the opportunity to grow it somewhere. Is that correct, Mr. Audio?
Councilor Parker and Mayor and councilors, we have to provide reasonable opportunity to folks who are desiring to grow this. It is treated, the difference between this and other agricultural products are with the restrictions we can place on the way it's growing. It can't be treated differently under the state law as far as to where it can be growing. If you're doing intense agriculture inside of a greenhouse, then you can place that in a more commercial or industrial zone, but we don't have that. That's our rub, is we have 90% of our zoning is H1 and H2 or more. It's almost entirely H1 and H2.
Is it possible to look at this in terms of, if we are allowing it in the A1 and A2 zones, that we can put a caveat in there that limits the areas of those A1, A2 zones that these facilities can go into? Meaning, if the A1, A2 zone is within, I don't want to say within, if the A1 and A2 zone is adjacent to residential development on there, then that's not an appropriate place to have these growing facilities on there. Is there an avenue that way to kind of control, or the idea of maybe we limit the density, because we are a small community on here, and so if all the A1 and A2 empty lots are filled up with it, that seems like an overly burdened density of these establishments. So I don't know, I'm going to stop talking, but it seems like smell, location, and density in terms of number of units is something we could try to control. Thank you.
If I may, Mayor, just to respond to Councilor Parker's statements. We have already done some things with setbacks. We've already done some things with limitations on sizes and so forth. One thing that we can do is look at the buffering of these grows from other residential properties, because most of the A1 and A2 have residences on them, and people can grow agricultural crops along with the house they live in. The other thing that we have to keep in mind is up to 12 plants are allowed permissively by any person at their home to be growing outside if they wish. We cannot regulate that more than the state has already done it. It is a fact that if your neighbor wants to grow marijuana, they can, up to 12 mature plants. And so this issue of smell will be there. It's going to be part of our reality unless we can convince our state legislators otherwise, which given the fact that this law was just passed, I do not believe that we have a good avenue for doing that. So I would propose we look at creating bigger and better setbacks, so we separate the grows from other residences, and we can look at density. It's just hard to regulate density in a rational way when you have, I mean, you end up having arbitrariness involved in it. And the way that people do it is they create numbers of growing facilities that can take place, but it has to be rationally related to a harm that you're trying to prevent. And because the state has said, yep, this is all good to go, it's difficult to discern how we can limit it to a degree that is going to make it a non-issue. So we are very willing and happy to look at ways we can further regulate it, but because of our unique zoning within the village that in many ways has been of a benefit to the village, in this particular instance, it limits our options because we don't have those commercial, standalone commercial areas to put large, intense grows in.
Yeah, Mayor Rowe, can I do one last statement? I know I already said I would stop.
Yes, yes.
That
Councilor
all
Parker.
of my, Mayor Rowe, councilors, all of my talking on this is to try to set up a situation where the residents and their homes in Corrales have the same kind of protections that the residents in Albuquerque in the residential zones have. So if there's a way to pull this off, I think that would be ideal. So anyway, thank you.
I don't disagree. I think you're going to find the zoning in Albuquerque is very different from ours. But Councilor Murray?
Thank you, Mayor. And Councilor Parker, I think you are on to something. I had submitted language to the administration to create buffers. And another concern is the water usage, because if they obtain water rights and they sink these, or put these greenhouses in with these facilities, their water usage is probably going to go up, and it may impact the local residents which are around these facilities. So I had submitted language to put a buffer in of a couple thousand feet between facilities. I also had put in language in which to increase the setbacks for these greenhouses, depending on the size of the greenhouse or the enclosed structure. So I think there's ability to do that. We may not be able to knock it all the way out, but I think we can put enough restraints in there that would at least give some of the residents some relief about some of these places that are going to go in.
Are we sort of agreed then that the attorneys will look at these ideas and try to see if we can strengthen buffering, see if we can see what zoning potential we have, knowing what the reality of our current zoning actually is, and then have you look at those things and bring it back to us kind of on a continuing basis as we get more information, what we can, literally what we can, how far out we can push the envelope, right?
Councilors, I would ask you, what do you think about a moratorium?
I mean, my thought is come up with an amendment that addresses this so we don't need the moratorium. I don't like the idea of moratoriums in general if we could pass an amendment, but we need to do something relatively quickly. I don't know how many applications have come in since September 1. Do we know the answer to that?
Aaron?
Madam Mayor, councilors, at this point, we have received one application for a commercial retailing, not for production. It would be basically another dispensary in an already established building. That is the only application we have received thus far.
And that's certainly good news, but I think we still need to, somebody's going to have one come up next to their house, and whether it's one or it's 100, we want to make sure that the one person that has one come up next to their house is protected to still enjoy their house.
Sure, I think that's everybody's goal. I don't think anybody, at this point, I think a moratorium would be premature, but I will ask council what he thinks.
I do not believe in this particular circumstance that we could legally do a moratorium, because we are a partner with a state licensing operation, and there is no mechanism or vehicle under state law to put in place a moratorium by us, especially since we have our ordinance going into effect that we already have in place. I would strongly encourage that if we want to take some action, we find that line that we can draw that says, okay, we can separate these uses from our other residential areas as much as we can. And then with all of the regulations we have in place to control the odor that we just passed.
Okay,
Can I ask a
I
hypothetical
want to
question?
mention too, and I'm sorry, Councilor Waldman, and then we do have public comment that I need to address.
Yes,
So
Randy,
Councilor
you
Waldman.
mentioned that there's some good news. There are some changes that the state has implemented. I'm wondering what kind of power we have in terms of, as Councilor Murray referred to, the water usage. There are technologies out there that for total recycling for a closed system. We have, given climate change, given that we're all on wells and septic, is there a way that we can require growers to have a closed system for their water usage?
Councilor Waldman, we could explore that as to how far we could go with that. I think in this issue, none of us can say with any certainty how many people are going to apply to do production of marijuana through grows within Corrales. The two things that are in our favor that we must recognize that I think are truths: our land is expensive. We don't have commercial zoning. We don't have municipal water. We don't have large indoor facilities existing that could be used for commercial, large-scale, intense grows. All of those things would say that we are not going to be the popular choice for growing marijuana. Now, does that say it's not going to happen? No, but I think that we are at a very early stage of this, but I do not think that because of the way our village is zoned with residences primarily on A1 and A2 lots, that we are a likely candidate for marijuana growers to target. And like I said, I mean, I can't place any money on that. I can't say that that's true, but there are certainly better availability of water on municipal water systems that exist throughout the state in larger communities. And so I think we have some modicum of solace from that.
Thank you.
Can I move over to public comment now? Aaron, who do we have who wishes to speak tonight?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I have a couple letters that I'll read very briefly, and then I have a couple folks signed up. The first letter is from Sabine Eisel, and it reads, "Following are more questions and thoughts regarding the commercial growing of cannabis in our village. As I was able to comment in person during the last village meeting and understand that the law went into effect September 1st, I do believe that this will have a major impact on all villagers. Therefore, it is of the utmost importance that you, our elected officials, take the time to review and make the necessary changes / amendments to the current ordinance so it works for all. A hard task at hand, but the future of our village is at stake. Why were village citizens not informed of these major implications? How much water is necessary to grow one plant? How much water and energy is needed to run a green/grow house? Has the drought status disappeared? What is the projected impact on our water table? Who conducted an analysis? Who permits wells for commercial growing? Lot coverage shall not exceed 35%. How does that apply to green/grow houses? Landscaping requirements, maximum height of fences and walls, what type is allowed? Are green/grow houses in compliance with the Night Sky Protection Act, NMSA 1978? Signage, property lighting is normally not an issue on agricultural property. How will this be handled? Increase in regular traffic and truck traffic throughout the village. Will state police cover the area? Nice to have a fixed road for now. Who will be checking on compliance? Who pays for that? What is the estimated cost? Estimated profit for the village? Who conducted analysis? Where is it published? To have the much appreciated land conservation and the thought of green/grow houses perhaps along scenic Corrales Road does not make any sense and certainly will not add to the charming character of the village. Any thoughts on the quality of life and property value impact this will cause? I grew up in the village and now live in this village. The beauty of that was and should be that the inhabitants are asked, voting takes place, and the majority of votes is respected. Sadly, it appears that transparency here took a back seat. Any decision/amendment should be published to all villagers and not just on your website. You cannot assume everyone has access to a computer. Thank you for your time and consideration. The next letter is from Court Kuntz, and it reads, last month, the City Council approved a new cannabis ordinance. There were at least 13 letters from Corrales residents expressing strong opposition to allowing commercial cannabis production in our A1 and A2 zones. We were led to believe that the letters would be read at the meeting. They were not. I strongly implore you to read them tonight. I also ask that they be forwarded and printed in the Corrales comment. The majority of Corraleños do not have a clue what is being crammed down their throats. It appears that your fear of the state was the reason 5 of you voted to approve. 2 of those votes were reluctantly yes. What kind of vote is that? Only Councilor Burkett had the best interest of the Corrales residents in mind by voting no. Your lawyer was obviously looking out for the best interest of the village government, not the residents of Corrales. Since that meeting, we have again had to suffer the smell of the Comedinas pot facility located 350 yards from my house. It's just not right. Apparently, there was a favorable Comedina wind the night of Starry Nights. If not for the wind, those of you attending might have gotten to experience it. There has to be a better way to comply with the state than allowing production everywhere and anywhere. Please try harder for your residents of Corrales. The next one is from Suzanne Williams. It reads, I am a resident of Corrales del Norte. This ordinance, without absolutely no consideration for the residents, needs to be amended. Our neighborhood has been greatly impacted by the Comedina operation. Traffic in our neighborhood has increased, along with trash on the sides of the road, and the smell of skunk is prevalent. And most importantly, the concern of security. One of our neighbors has already moved because of the cannabis farm, and another has their home on the market for the same reason. If the council doesn't amend this ordinance, the residents of Corrales will be the ones that suffer while cannabis growers prosper. No commercial cannabis growing in A1 and A2 zones. Next is Sam Schultz. It reads, this is Sam Schultz and Frank Petrosky, owners of 30 Camino de la Paloma, and also a vacant lot in the Camino del Norte. When we bought these properties, we were told that there was a medical cannabis operation on the properties. This was proper to the new law passed in 2020 by the state. We made no comment on this, but when we were told that there were plans to make it a commercial grow operation, we were concerned. We believe that a commercial operation as this really does not belong in a residential area. an area where we and our neighbors choose to buy property so that we can live in a quiet area that was non-commercial. As I understand, there are designated commercial areas at Corrales that were designed to be specific for our commercial activity. We feel that this operation would certainly affect our property value and our enjoyment of said property. Please consider keeping this operation in a currently designated commercial area. The last letter is from David Williams, and it reads, the effect of cannabis production in our village are only now becoming apparent. Despite the popular concept that marijuana is a benign weed that is no worse than alcohol, the state is still classified it as a drug. There are numerous publications that describe the deleterious of cannabis, and would ask the council members to seek out and educate yourselves before proceeding. In addition, it would appear that the council has adopted the position that cannabis is the same as any other crop, and therefore it must be treated as such. Its production is clearly not the same as growing a crop such as corn or peppers. If the council continues to pursue its current path, there must be put in place such ordinances that require the same procedures for the production of all agricultural products, permits, licenses, fees, and etc. And then I do have a couple folks that signed up. The first is Fred Hashimoto.
Good evening, Fred. Go ahead.
Madam Mayor, can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Okay. Madam Mayor, councilors, others, to consider cannabis as a regular crop is ludicrous. It's much different than other crop plants. One, a pound of it in New Mexico costs up to $4,500. Two, it's frequently grown intensively in enclosed structures, which have 24/7 operations requiring huge amounts of water and electricity and high security measures such as fences, wires, lights, and window bars. Three, in New Mexico, the regulation of cannabis businesses covers pages and pages of rules, regulations, certifications, and licensures. Four, New Mexico limits me to growing only 6 plants in my backyard. It doesn't limit me to only 6 chili plants, or 6 tomato plants, or 6 stalks of corn. 5, the village has recognized cannabis-specific issues. It writes, quote, whereas the village finds that high-yield crop raising, often referred to as intensive agriculture, is a common practice with cannabis production and has potential adverse impacts such as increased discharge of pollutants and light and odoriferous nuisances on the village if not properly regulated. Yes, the village has already put some special restrictions on intensive growth structures, such as slightly increased setbacks, which are insufficient for cannabis, and HVAC adaptations and noise restrictions specifically for cannabis growth structures. Unfortunately, the village's current regulations are inadequate and do almost zero to protect residential neighborhoods from the invasiveness of intensive cannabis growing, which was alluded to in its own whereas. Municipalities and counties in many states, farm states, have setbacks up to $1,000 feet for cannabis growth structures from residential property lines. Corrales says 25 feet. These buffer setback restrictions are not prohibiting use. They're not taking use away. They allow, but they set limits. It's a great buffer. Attorneys might say the village can get sued if it steps out too far. Really, the village can get sued if it does or if it doesn't. Other municipalities and counties are protective of their residential neighborhoods. Corrales is not. Case law doesn't exist concerning growing recreational cannabis in New Mexico because that hasn't begun yet. Corrales would seem to be in a good position to defend a more protective stance for residential neighborhoods because of its pre-existing Ordinance 18-2, which banned cannabis cultivation, etc., in residential A1 and A2 zones. Corrales would be acting most consistently with his well-documented cannabis stance and not capriciously. Time is of the essence. Please amend quickly the current ordinance to give protections to residential neighborhoods from invasive, intensive, commercial cannabis growing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And then I also have Pam Garfield.
Ms. Garfield, are you there?
Yes, hi there. Can you hear me?
I sure can. Go ahead.
Hi there. Yes, my name is Pam Garfield and I live at 7532 Corrales Road. And I just want to begin by saying that I am a psychiatric nurse practitioner who sees plenty of patients on medical cannabis. However, the actual growth of marijuana is another issue. I believe the issue of marijuana cultivation within the village should be met with urgent and protective amendments to preserve and protect our A1 and A2 zones before it is too late. There is already an existing ordinance 18-002 already mentioned by Steve Gutierrez and Fred Hashimoto, specifically banning cannabis growing along with manufacturing and distributing in A1 and A2 zones where most of us live. What happened to that hard-fought battle over the same issue in 2017 and 2018 in which this ordinance was voted on and approved? Can it just be thrown away? Maybe not. I believe there is still hope. Reality of this type of dense production of marijuana with the current ordinance will require 8-foot wire fencing, motion detectors, high-intensity lighting, along with the need to transport this product in which marijuana will travel on our state highway 448 through Corrales, past all the schools, churches, and daycares. How can Corrales ensure public safety as marijuana is transported through the village? Consider Washington State that has created land use and zoning regulations that provides a perfect template to follow, in which Washington has set guidelines for residential and small rural parcels to not allow issue licenses to marijuana producers, processors, or retailers on properties that is used for residents, because law enforcement must have access to their premises for inspections. With this exception of marijuana patients who can grow this. Washington State also limits warehouse type structures for growing marijuana to industrial and commercial zones, only there and not in agricultural residential zones. Corrales can blaze the same path to protect our agricultural zones in which we live, raise our children, our children's children, and our animals. I'm hoping that this will happen tonight. With strong conviction from our counselors and our governing body. Another issue is irrigation. This year, surface irrigation has been severely limited in Corrales, and we have had to scale back on irrigation to only every 3 weeks, which barely keeps our crops, orchards, and pastures alive because of the severe drought conditions. We've been told for this coming 2020 year, it might even be more impacted. How will marijuana cultivation affect the farmers who are producing food production? Marijuana requires significant watering per plant with intense energy resources. There's an article called Marijuana Venture that I was Googling, and if there's allowed to be about 400 plants per acre, they use 900 gallons per plant, and it would need about 360,000 gallons per acre per season. And that's significant. Along with irrigation issues, the Office of the State Engineer does not allow domestic wells to be used for growing commercial marijuana, which tells me if you need a commercial well to grow marijuana, then it needs to be in a commercial zone or industrial zone. Also, according to the New Mexico Reclamation Manual, this department does not approve of reclamation facilities for the watering and the cultivation of marijuana. So rainwater could not be considered. This was brought up during the Verdes site where they thought that they could use rainwater. That's just not allowed. Tonight, U.S. leaders of our village have a perfect opportunity to blaze a trail for New Mexico and protect our village by providing a shining example for our state. Please stand your ground and not be intimidated by the state, attorneys, or other forces, and protect our homes, our residential areas who live in A1 and A2 zones from an open door marijuana ordinance, and ban marijuana growth in A1 and A2 zones, please, where we raise our children, our children's children, and all our animals. Also, I just want to mention one more thing. What about an environmental impact study that can study how this negatively will affect our village? That might be another thing that can be considered so that we have other resources to rely on to help us fight this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Garfield. Appreciate your comments.
And
I think, what?
Sorry, there is one more. Mr. Flora has signed up for this as well. And this is the last one.
Thank you.
Yes, since I've been fighting the village on all kinds of aspects here, I might as well chime in on this. Yeah, big sigh there. Well, what I'm going to probably end up doing, since I'm being denied selling our property here, is we will probably go ahead and apply for the application. We might as well get in on it at a young stage here. And so one thing I don't want to do is I do not want to deal with Lori. I hope I can deal with the village attorney. Now, is there only one person that we can deal with to allow this application to go through? Do we have to just deal with Lori, or can we deal with the village attorney or somebody else in charge? Because we have issues with Lori. We will probably be asking for a permit for production. And we do have water rights. We have big property. So I think, if we're being forced to keep our property, we might as well make it productive. We got residential and we got agricultural. So, I'm in the A1. Yes, I'm in the A1. So I will fight for people wanting it in the A1. I guess that's what I'm going to have to do to get out of the village one way or the other. My plan, as you guys probably don't know it, our plan was to stay here, take care of Suzanne's parents till they passed away. We're 20 years over that. We wanted to get away from this village, even though, Suzanne was born and raised here. So if we're being forced to stay here in the village, we've got to get some kind of income, and the marijuana, it looks like a pretty good income for us. I don't know, that's how we feel. So we might as well go ahead and apply for our application for production. And I would like to be able to do it through somebody else besides Lori. Is that possible? Can anybody chime in on that?
Well, thank you very much for your comments, Mr. Hufflora. You can apply for a business license the same way as everybody else. Councilor Knight?
Thank you. I will do that.
I was thinking, if we're trying to narrow down where production can take place, couldn't we use something like with our scenic byway and say that there can't be any greenhouses along Corrales Road, because that would interrupt the scenic byway?
I think that our attorney should look at that. That's kind of a clever and creative way to do it. I want to make it clear that nobody here, I appreciate everybody's comments. And I think it's really important to understand that we are trying to create something that does protect our village for sure. And that is important to all of us. So I really do want to direct the attorneys to look at everything they can, including whether or not the scenic byway could create additional buffers.
Right.
What additional other buffering we can do.
I have another idea.
Okay.
Besides scenic byway, why don't we have something that says, again, it would just kind of narrow down things that the growers would have to be on dedicated roads, because officers can't.
Here we go about the roads now. Okay.
Officers can't just go up and down private roads, right? They can't patrol those, but they only can patrol dedicated roads. Is that correct? So that would narrow it down even more. Again, I'm just throwing things out just to see.
I think everyone is looking for options for us to protect our village as much as we can. And so that's what I would direct tonight, is for the attorneys. And I want every counselor to please send your ideas forward. Some of them Randy may have to say that he doesn't think one or the other of them is going to be viable, but we may have some approaches that we can use. Okay. Councilor Murray?
Yeah, Mayor, I think that you're gonna have to allow amendments. And regardless of what Randy proposes, we're gonna make amendments to any legislation that comes up before the council. And the fact is, I think you're gonna find that it's not gonna be homogenized either. It's kind of gonna probably get messy. And we're gonna have to expect to take on lawsuits if the council so desires and wants to direct the legislation in a certain direction. But you cannot restrict councilors from proposing legislation and amendments before this governing body. I
don't think anybody's doing that. I think what we're saying, I think what's happening, excuse me, sir, excuse me. What is happening is every time we pass an ordinance, we have legal counsel that vets it. That's all that we're saying. I could not responsibly suggest otherwise. So
I think, Mayor, that you're
whatever
wrong.
you want to do is completely, part of your job to go ahead and put your ideas forth. But I do think in order to do better risk management, frankly, and better governance, we have to allow our attorneys to look at it and see if they think it's a viable option.
Who do they work for? They work for us. And so consequently, if we submit an amendment to be put on the agenda, it needs to go on the agenda. And Randy can make his recommendations, you can make your recommendations, and council can decide one way or the other. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank
So
you.
You guys work for
Councilor
us and we don't get any say.
Mayor?
Yes.
If I may, and Councilor Murray, we, by no means in doing legal review, do we attempt to in any way restrict your rights as a counselor. We understand them completely. What we want to do is only take the council's time and our legal billing costs that the village has to carry when there's a consensus that comes from the body to put forward a proposed ordinance and bring it before the body. Our typical process is a discussion, and then when there is a consensus that something should be done as there was tonight, we will bring back a draft, and believe me, I will be working with you, and I hope to get your input as well as everyone else's on getting this draft done. So that's my perspective. I simply want to create a process where we can get as much good work done as we can.
All right. Okay. I'm going to move on. Yes, Councilor Burkett.
It'll be very brief, I promise. I have not been a counselor a very long time, but there has not been as strong of an opinion in one direction on anything that we have discussed in this village. And we've discussed some things that people are pretty opinionated about. And when we all answer to our constituents, they have a very clear thought on what they want to do with this. I know it's not directly in line with current state law. At some point, we may have to shift from our duty to them versus our risk, and I would err on our duty to the constituents versus risk aversion.
All right, understood. Understood. All right, let's move on to announcements, future agenda items. Yes, Councilor Burkett. I'm sorry, Councilor Murray. I think Councilor Burkett had his hand up a fraction before you. Councilor Burkett?
I would love to discuss fences in the near future.
I know you would. And I think actually, I think the item, I think it is going to be on the next agenda. I think it's part of the Chapter 18 revisions that'll be coming up. I'll try and make that happen for you. Councilor Murray?
Oh, that's what I was going to bring up too.
Okay. Fences, fences, fences. Okay. And then we will have, obviously, we're going to have some work on, I guess it'll be a little bit later for the Bosque plan. And then we're going to have, obviously, something on the Chapter Amendment 18 amendments. Anybody else have anything at the moment that they can think of for the next meeting, which is on the 28th?
Mayor, I would only suggest that, Randy, if you're going to take on this cannabis project, I want to see something within a month.
would suspect that we can have some options for you by next meeting.
That's what I would anticipate as well. Okay. All right.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
if I can just
Who am
interrupt
I
very
listening
briefly.
to? Aaron, yes.
Yes, I apologize. I just want to remind council that we do have another appeal hearing on Thursday at 5:30. I realize it was a little confusing, so I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page that we will be having another Zoom meeting. And if you have any questions about that, please just email me or call me. And that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right.
I just have one quick question, Mayor.
Yes.
So if we do have any suggestions, we can give them to, about the cannabis issue, we can give them to Andy or Mr. Audio, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And everyone will be looked at, and all he can do is give us his opinion about their viability, right? It's always that way.
Right.
So, but we will have all that next time, because we wouldn't want to give this up. So, okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good night. Thank you very much. Lots of good information. Thank you.